Right, so you've probably seen this style of motion graphics in like a Netflix documentary or just like a cutscene. For as simple as it looks, there is a lot that is going on here. So I'm going to basically show you how you can make something like this completely from scratch. That's going to include the dial, the texturing, all the text and all the little elements around it, and then also animating it in After Effects. And yeah, so basically the whole thing. Before we jump in, all the project files for this will be on my Patreon. Obviously, if you want to follow along, you can just download them. Yeah, let's just jump into it. So just a few pointers before we do. We're going to mainly be using Illustrator, Photoshop, and After Effects for this. Now, I'm not too good in Illustrator, but all the stuff we're going to be doing is relatively basic, so I'm sure you'll be fine. So let's just hop into it and get going. So in Illustrator, let's just open up a new 1920 by 1080, and we can call this dial. Gonna have one artboard, and let's just create that. Now let's just get a ellipse tool and hold shift and drag this out, and then we're just going to align this in the middle like that, and we can just remove the fill here and just have a stroke. Gonna leave it at 1 point for now, and then I'm just gonna get a line tool, line segment tool, and just come here and draw out a little line. Just gonna come in and bring this down a tiny bit like that, just so it's not touching the actual circle. So you can see we have our two things created here, and now what we can do is just bring in another ellipse tool, and this is more just so as a guide, and we're just gonna center that as well in the middle. So selecting this line here, we're just gonna make sure that it is positioned perfectly by just coming here to the middle, and now we can come down to our rotate tool, and then just holding Alt, we can just select where the center is like that. We're gonna just rotate this by 2, and let's just press copy. That's going to give you another line here, and we can just hold D just to duplicate this out loads of times all the way around this dial. Nice. So we can actually just sort out our layers here. We can remove this guide, and we're just going to make a new layer, and we can call this lines. Select all of our lines here, and then just drag and drop them into this layer here, and then we can call this one circle. Okay, now we're going to add in some text, and to do that I'm just going to do something like this. So let's just start off with 0 and just give it the font that you want. I'm going to use this kind of like military inspired one, and I'll also include that as well in my files. And we can just drag this out maybe like 13 times. Now we can just put in the numbers. Right, so we have all these now, and they're all separate, and we can now come over and select our circle as well, and just come to the objects on path and select this path here. So that's going to distribute them all around this circle, and we can just come to this little tool here and bring them to the outside by putting the anchor point at the bottom here. Okay, so now we want to rotate these around, and in order to do that, you just got to find this dial here, and this affects the spacing. So you can see they're all lining up like that. I'm just going to give them maybe like 7 dots or 7 lines in between each of another, and then we can move all these around like this. Okay, that's looking good. So we're going to add in a new layer here, just bring it to the top, then select all of our numbers, and then just put them in this new layer and call this numbers. We have all of our 3 layers there sorted, and if we were to rotate this, they're all going to be perfectly aligned, so it will just rotate seamlessly. And we can now hop into Photoshop. So in Photoshop, we're going to just make the same composition here. Let's just call this Netflix Motion Master. Leave that background for now. And we're going to come back into our Illustrator, select all of these, Control C, and then come over to our Photoshop and Control V. We're going to paste these in as layers, and that's going to do its thing. And now you can see we have this perfectly in here, and also it retains all the numbers and the lines here and the circle. We're just going to actually merge all of these because we're not going to be moving them. So we can just right click and convert to a smart object and then rasterize it like that. Call these lines and just bring this circle outside of this group. We can just call this circle and the numbers are fine as they are. Okay, we can just give this a color and we can hide that. We're going to come back to that later. So now let's bring in our base texture here and we're going to use this paper texture. Just going to drag and drop that into our Photoshop. Bring this up a bit like that and like that. We can call this base. Just bring it to the bottom here. And now let's create those 3 little rectangles here that are going to house our digits, right? So we can just bring out a square, whatever size you want it. And we can come here and add in some rounding. On this, we're going to come over to our rectangle here, double click it, and let's add in a drop shadow, or inner shadow, sorry. Here are the settings that I'm going to use. It's just remembering them from the last time I created this. So that's looking pretty good here. And you can even add in a bit of noise if you want, just to make it a bit more textured. And then I'm just going to add in another inner shadow just to really outline the actual section. So as you can see in our reference, this has a bit of texture in it as well. So we can just bring in something like this. It has just a bit of grit on it and that's going to work nicely. Drag that in and just resize it like that. And what we can do is just select both of these, group them, call this square 01. Now we can add in a screen or an overlay, whatever you think looks the best. So I like that linear dodge here. So what we can do is just right click and create a clipping mask from the linear dodge. And we can just call this grit. And I'm just going to Control J on that and make this a clipping mask as well. And you can just bring this up a bit and just add in a tiny bit more detail here. Nice. So what we can do is just select these 3, group them, call this square. I'm going to just get my type tool. I'm going to add in, make it 0, 0 here. Select it and just resize it. Come over to my properties and just adjust here, just the width between them, and give this a different color. Something like that. You can play with the blending styles of this as well, just so some of that texture comes through very slightly. You can just zoom out and see what that's looking like. Right, that's looking good. Last thing I'm going to do is just add in a drop shadow here and just make sure that it is super close. So just kind of giving it an outline, so a distance of like 1, and you can change the color of that to like a black or something. It kind of just gives it an outline just to feel like those digits are actually standing off the background here a bit. We can call this numbers, and this is basically now a template that we've just made. We can just Control J on it, call this square 02, Control T, and just move this over. And then Control J again, call this square 03. And for our number here, we can actually drag it over again. And in our number here, we're just going to have one of these zeros like that. Let's just place this in the middle. Right, so now we have those square cutouts all done, and that one is just looking a tiny bit uneven. Yeah, that's looking better. We also have our dial done, so we can just enable our dial. What else we're going to add? We're going to add in this line down the middle of our page. So we can come over to our textures, and I just have this crease here. We can drag and drop that into our Photoshop, and we can just center that somewhere like that. So we're going to multiply this, and we can just Control L on this, and we're just going to match this so we can't see any of that other background. Lovely. And that's giving us a nice bit of detail here, and we can Control J, Control T, and just rotate this around just to give us a full line. Perfect. Right, that's looking good. Can select all of these 3 layers, group them, and call them BG. Let's just give it a different color. And we'll give our dial a different color as well. Okay, now we're gonna add in some of those little details that will come along with the dial, and we're nearly there then. So what we're gonna do is just come up and get our text, and we can just type out random digits like this. Just bring it down in size a lot. Right, so these little details really make this effect pop out a bit. So I'm just going to do like this, few spaces in between. As you can see, we're going to need to put in a little highlight behind it. So rectangle tool, give this maybe like a little bit more gray so it stands off the background. And we can just drag this out a good bit like so. Great. Bring it underneath this text. And then just give it a blending option here. Gonna just use a multiply. Gonna make this into a little template as well, so we can group this, call this detail 01. Control J on this, bring it down. We can just come in here, change the numbers, Control J again, bring it down. These types of details that you probably wouldn't even notice when you're watching the video, but yeah, just really adds to the effect. So we have 3 of those, and now we can duplicate all 3 of them. Control T, let's bring this down a good bit. Let's make these much smaller, like that. Let's just put all these into a group called details. Give it a color. We can put these into a group as well and call these squares. And then we can just add in maybe some lines like this and just give it a fill, like a red fill. Give it a multiply, or even that looks good. Then I'm just going to add in one of these. So I'm just going to make a square like this, and I'm going to press our select tool over here. I'm going to select both of these top layers by just going to control and then press shift on the other one, and then we can just drag this out like that. We can just hold alt, bring this like that. Let's give this one a white color. Double click this and then color overlay, make it white. Select them both again, drag them out. Grand, kind of like a warning type. You can select those layers and just right click and convert them to a smart object. And then we can just make one more rectangle like this. Just bring this above it and then make this layer that we've just made a clipper mask. And now we can just drag this along somewhere that we like it. We can select both of them, convert to a smart object, and then just rasterize the layer and bring it into details. So we call this type. Right, so now we have all that in. The last thing we're missing is our text underneath our boxes, and then just our main text as well. Let's just hide this dial, and in our squares we're going to add in some text. So let's just come into square 1, and this is going to be hours. We can just place that here. Then open square 2 and just hold alt and drop this into square 2. We can just bring this over to here, and let's just call this minutes. And then last but not least, bring this into square 3, and we can call this seconds. Great. And then our last thing we're going to add in is that final text, and it's just going to be on the right side of here, and it's going to say time until departure. And we can scale this up and just leave it somewhere like that. Just put that in its own group and call this main. Right, now we are in a position, we can just, before we export, let's just enable our dial and just make sure that the dial is in the center of the comp. If you were to place it here like this, it's gonna just cut it all out when we bring it into After Effects, and we don't want that. So let's just bring that back, and then just save this out, and we're gonna jump into After Effects. Inside of After Effects, what we can do is a new composition, 1920 by 1080, and we can call this Master. It's gonna be 10 seconds long, and let's just drop in our PSD here. Drag and drop this into our master. First thing we can do is right click and add in a new solid. Just make a black solid, and then we're going to come up to our rectangle tool, and we can just double click on that, which will give us a shape that basically fills up the whole composition. Come down to your rectangle path and just unlink this, and we can bring this down. That, and then just select our black solid and make it a track math of that shape and just invert it. Select both of these, pre-compose them, and call these bars. You can just give this a red color and then lock it. We can just leave that alone now. Let's bring up this dial here. So I'm gonna select our dial and scale it up a good bit. Right, that's looking pretty good. And now we can actually just animate that. We're gonna press R on our dial. Rotate this to where you want it to start, so somewhere like that. And then we're gonna want this to end. Let's just move on to like 3 seconds and end somewhere here. And because we want this to start fast and then kind of slow down over time, we're gonna use this quart out. And here is how that looks on the value graph. So then that starts fast and then slowly gets to its point. Lovely. Okay, let's come to our squares and let's just scale these up a tiny bit. I'm gonna just place these right in line with the middle here. And we can also come to our main text and just put that somewhere like there. And then let's animate our seconds tab here. So in our squares, square tree, our numbers, we're gonna right click and we can create editable text. Control, Alt and Home just to center the anchor point here. And we're gonna add in a slider control on it. In our source text here, we're gonna just get our pick whip and just select it onto this slider. And that's gonna give us this little box here. And what we can do is just type in math.round. Let's just delete this bracket and then just put it at the end. That means now when we increase this, this number is going to increase as well. So let's add in a keyframe on our slider. Bring this up to like 2.5 seconds. And then put this to 10. So then that goes like this. Grand. So what we're going to do is just so this stays fully in the center here. On this frame here, I'm just going to Control Shift D just to split it. And then on this next frame, this is going to just be put in the middle like that. So then it goes bam, 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 bam. I can come a frame early. So now we have our counter going up. And this is how everything is looking. And we probably want that to animate in a tiny bit quicker. So we can pull this down and then just split this here. Right, so now that's looking a bit better. Now we can focus on these details here on the right hand side, and we can just drag this to somewhere like here. And we can actually uncomp these, and now we have them all in their own layer. So select all of them and let's just give them a different color. And let's just rotate these all. We can pick the different positions where we want these. So obviously you can be super random with this. And then you're going to just have to adjust the rotation as well. You can press Y, and if you want to just have a bit more control, you can just center the anchor point on it, and then when you rotate it, it's just a bit easier. Just going to pre-compose this, and then you can put this somewhere. Then just make sure that the blend mode is back on. Just bring this tape up to somewhere like this. Press Y, bring the keyframe the anchor point. Let's just scale this down. And let's just add in a different blend mode as well. And yeah, you kind of get the gist. If you want to just... I'm happy with how that is looking. Obviously, you can adjust the composition if you had a bit more time on it. But what we're going to do now is I'll Control A, press U, and then on our dial here, we're just going to duplicate this, and let's just call this Rotation Details Master. Bring that up to the top here, and let's just give that a different color. So we have this, we can have this details null here. We can delete that, and we're going to select all of our details here and just give this a null. Select this null and then connect it to this rotation details, and then we can hide the rotation details master. Before we link the null, we're just going to bring it to the end here, and then we're going to link the null. So then we're getting this rotation here. Lovely. But now what we can do is, because this is on its own separate layer, we can offset this a bit to that animation, and you're getting this nice effect where these are coming in at a different time. Lovely. We can select all these, and just to keep this tidy, we can right click, pre-compose it, and then call these details, and that's going to work perfectly like so. And now we're going to add in the final touches, which really brings this to life. We can come over to our textures, and we're going to bring in this gobo, and let's just come to our After Effects and drop it in. And right away, when we press multiply, you'll see what that's doing. That's kind of just really bringing this to life here. So what we can do is Control and space. I'm just going to add in a levels, and now you can brighten up the lighter areas and even darken the darker areas. Because this is a big image, what we can do now is kind of just add in a nice little animation. So let's just do a really slow position keyframe. So we're going to keyframe it at frame 0, and then let's just come with the 5 seconds and just slowly bring that to somewhere like that. So now you're getting that nice bit of movement, and you can even just bring down the opacity a bit, just so it's not too jarring. Select all of our layers, and let's pre-compose these. It's going to be master clamp. We can add in a new adjustment layer, and we can call this blur. I'm just going to add in a Gaussian blur over the whole composition, but underneath our bars. You can put it to something like 2, and let's just see, something like that. And on our master comp here, we are going to put our scale keyframe at around 3 seconds, and let's just scale in a bit. So now we're getting a bit of movement like that, and we can add in a new adjustment layer, call this frame rate, and let's just drop this by using a posterized time, something like 12 seconds. And what we can do is just copy, instead of putting that frame rate on outside of the comp, just copy that and just put it on the inside here, maybe underneath the gobo, just so it's just our animation that's getting affected. Yeah, that's looking a lot better and smoother. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add in one more adjustment layer, and we can call this focus blur, and then just add in a fast box blur on this, increase it just a tiny bit, not too much. And then let's just get our eclipse tool and just do something like this. We can invert this and add in a feather, and then that kind of just focuses our attention on the middle here, and that's giving you something like that. Last thing I actually forgot to do was add in that little triangle here, and yeah, I'll just do that now. So with our star tool, let's just make it black, and we can just drag and drop this out like this. If you have a star, you can just use your scroll wheel while you're dragging, and that's going to decrease the number of edges, just hold shift, something like that. Control, Alt and Home. And let's just center that like here. And then we can just bring it underneath our gobo and our adjustment layer and bring down the opacity a tiny bit, just so it looks like it's blending in. This is how everything is looking. Right, so that was the tutorial. Creating it from scratch obviously is the way to go. You have so much more control over the art direction and stuff. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. And as I said before, all the project files are over on my Patreon. Yeah, if there's any videos that you want to see in the future, let me know. Anything that you want me to break down, I'm happy to do so. So, hope you enjoyed. Cheers.